Welcome to ChiroSphere, where we talk about all things chiropractic and some things not so chiropractic. I'm Dr. Ray Foxworth, your host for ChiroSphere and CEO of ChiroHealth USA, the network that works for chiropractic. Today, we're joined by a leader who defines what it means to bridge the gap between high-level strategy and human potential. With over 35 years of experience across more than a dozen industries, our guest has navigated the C-suite of Fortune 20 organizations and currently serves as the Chief Experience Officer for NCMIC Group. He is a master of organizational performance, a sought-after keynote speaker, and the co-author of the transformative book, It Begs the Question, a guide that has redefined coaching for leaders across North America. Beyond the boardroom, he is a 2024 Board Member of the Year and a dedicated advocate for the chiropractic profession. Whether he's discussing the future of AI, navigating organizational change, or mentoring the next generation of talent, his mission remains the same: helping others maximize their potential. Please welcome executive coach, author, community leader, Sheikh Heber. That's really not how you pronounce his name, but that's how he's been introduced in the past. So I couldn't resist. It's Chick Herbert, okay? He's just one of us.
That's right. I'm not that fancy.
Yeah. So,
Uh,
Chick, as Chief Experience Officer, first of all, let me pause right there. What is a Chief Experience Officer?
my boss asks me that question every day, and I try and avoid answering that. Um, I describe my job as the intersection of people development, process and system development, and technology. And how do you bring those things together to optimize the performance of a team and an organization?
Got it. Well, now that I know what a CXO is, you kind of have a unique vantage point then, because you are at the intersection of several different areas of what would be, in any business, bringing those pieces together. What do you see right now as the biggest challenge currently facing the chiropractic profession, and what's NCMIC doing to help doctors navigate them?
Well, first, thanks for having me on, and thanks for the
Yeah.
kind introduction. That might be the best introduction I've ever had, and I mean that sincerely. It was very kind, and I have so much respect for you, and it's a pleasure to be on here.
Well,
Uh,
glad to have
as,
you.
as you and I have talked about, and we've talked about with many others, there are a lot of challenges facing the profession, and I'm not an alarmist, but I am a realist, and I pride myself as a leader on not being too high in good times and not being too low in bad times, and presenting myself as a stable, steady presence. So having said all that, there are definitely challenges on the horizon, and there are things that I would describe as right on the horizon. Some of those are just societal. You've got a demographic cliff that is hitting the chiropractic colleges following the recession of 2008. There have been a lot fewer babies being born in the US and around the world. So that's happening. You've got a large generation that is retiring and nearing retirement. The number I've heard is 17,000 people a day in the US turn
Wow.
65.
Yeah.
Uh, it's typically 14 to 15,000, but for the next 3 years, it's 17,000 a day. So you've got a large population that is leaving the profession that has a lot of history and context. And then you've got a lighter pipeline of people coming into the profession because of just a population decline, but also with the cost of education, some of the changes around student lending, which I think are good from a society perspective to not have people take on so much debt, but it definitely creates a short-term problem for the colleges. And then you've got a lot of singularly disadvantages that face chiropractors and chiropractic from Medicare, private insurance, both reimbursements, that is a big obstacle to overcome. And then on top of that, you've got the complexity that's facing any small business operator in the world today, which many chiropractors are, just with compliance, with insurance, all of the things that have to be managed on a daily basis. And it's a really rewarding job, And I think what makes chiropractors so unique is that entrepreneurial spirit. But it's not always easy to be an entrepreneur.
I think that is so true. There are. I was reading something the other day that was talking about when you have a high performing employee in a given role. I mean, this actually happened in my practice many years ago. I had a dynamite chiropractic assistant that was, with me in the exam rooms, really my right hand, and she did such a good job. I became an idiot and decided to promote her to the front desk. And this girl who was killing it as a chiropractic assistant in the treatment area literally was crying by the end of the day, the
Mm.
very first day. And, it finally hit me, people have a gifting, people have a tendency to do well in one area, and sometimes we as management think, "Well, geez, let's promote them right on up the ladder," and we take them out of their gifting and put them in a situation where they aren't high performing, and so that affects them negatively, and it really is a challenge. But I wanna put a bow on what you said earlier. So, basically what we need to, because I like to boil things down to the simplest form. So, basically what we need to do as chiropractors is have a lot more babies and send them to chiropractic college. Is that what I'm hearing, chick?
Yes, and win the lottery so you can fund all those kids.
Exactly, yeah. So, okay, I hope everybody got that nugget for the
Yeah, so I think that concludes our discussion.
Yeah,
Thanks very much,
absolutely.
and yeah, I mean, these are large systemic issues that are not easy to change, but I'm not a blind optimist, but I am an optimistic person. And so there are a lot of challenges facing the profession, and there's no singular thing, but I do believe that we can address these issues, but it's going to require people to come together and have a unified front so that everybody is on the same page, seeking the same things. Because I've worked in a number of different industries. I'm not a chiropractor. I'm actually a recovering engineer by degree, and it's not a large profession, and so when you don't have a large profession and then you have some fragmentation within it, that just dissolves and dilutes the pool of resources that you have, and I do feel, as an outsider sitting and listening in, there's a lot of duplication of efforts that takes place across the profession, and it's all done with positive intent. People aren't doing that out of spite, or desire to be less efficient. It's because everybody thinks they have to work on the things that they have to work on. But how do you bring those resources together?
Yeah, that has always been a challenge, and when you look at the stats, I've heard the number. There's about a 20% decrease in students coming into the profession, and just so everyone's aware, that's not just in the chiropractic field. That's kind of across the board again, partly because of the population issue. And so when you've got limited numbers, I mean, you really do have to focus on, all right, where can we find common ground? Where can we come together to where we may have our individual differences, but if I've said this before, leadership on a couple of different stages. When we start making decisions that are in our best interest or our group's best interest, we'll make a certain decision that serves them. When we're healthcare providers, we have to decide, is what's important to me as a chiropractor more important than what's important to people as patients? And if I feel like if we start making decisions based on what's in the best interest of the patients and the populations that we serve, we'd probably make some different decisions. And so, that I have to check myself all the time whenever I'm trying to make a business decision. If I'm not doing it for the right reasons or I don't have the right focus, it rarely ever works out. And I'll just spill my guts here on this. Every time that my company at my direction has decided to try to venture into something else. Like we started to do a telemedicine thing when COVID hit. And the reason that I did it is I saw an opportunity and that it could generate potentially a lot of revenue. So my driver was making money versus my driver in Chiro Health, which is to improve the quality of the lives of the doctors, the patients, and our team and their teams. And that's a totally different perspective. And so that was about $100,000 lesson that I had to learn that, if your purpose isn't aligned with your business model or what you're trying to accomplish, save your money, save your time. And then so it's like Simon Sinek says, get your why and
Yep.
get it right. Yep.
Yeah, I agree, and it's also easy. Um, so I've had an interesting career where I would describe myself as a generalist. You've got a lot of people who are specialists. So in our organization, you may have grown up as a claims adjuster and you've operated in that world. You may be an underwriter. You may be on business development. I've done a lot of those things in my career in different functions and different industries. And it it's such a simple and fundamental thing that you just described, but it's easy to get off track, and I see a lot of companies that also don't look at it from the customer lens and what is the patient experience like, and they're like, "Well, our patient experience is great." I'm like, "Well, how do you know it? Have you ventured through as a patient? Have you done secret shopping of your own processes to see, well, God, that's really stupid. I have to enter this 3 times, when I go into the portal."
Yeah.
And it's those little things, and the term not new is friction, and the more friction you have in the process, the more difficult it is to do business with you, and I'm with you. I think, does it align with the core values, the vision, and your mission? And also, is it better for the stakeholder and the customer, whoever that is in your process? And both seem really simple, but it's in a life where everything comes at you so fast and there's so many things going on, I think it's easy to misstep.
Yeah. It's interesting. About 2 weeks ago, I ended up getting a tear in my cornea. And so I go to the local eye doc or pretty big operation, probably 20, 30 eye docs all under one roof. Chiropractors, there's a hint. um, but my experience going through that, I filled out some paperwork online. I went into their office. They said, you need to fill this out. I said, well, I've already done that online. Well, the doctor's going to need this when you see him. So I fill it out. And now in 3 different places, I have entered my name, my address, all the demographics, and I get into the doctor's and get into the doctor's room, and he calls me by the wrong name. So basically, they're not even looking at their intake paperwork, and if you do have intake paperwork, really on paper still, it's probably a copy of a bad copy of a bad copy, and little things like that send messages, you
And
know?
it's so annoying. I mean,
It
I my wife has been seeing some different doctors, and that is one thing. And then the other is telling the story of what brought her there today. She told it when she made the appointment. She told it to the front desk person. She filled out the paperwork. The nurse came in. The first thing the nurse did is, "Why are you here today?" Well,
Yeah.
I just I
Read it.
wrote 2 paragraphs, and then the nurse leaves and the doctor comes in, and it's exactly the same thing, and it's just maddening to me.
Yeah.
So, you know, are they smart people? Yeah, they're 1,000 times smarter than me, but smart doesn't necessarily mean you look at it from a customer perspective or a patient perspective.
Many years ago, I had a coach that I was using at that time this was before everybody was talking about customer experience and process and things. And he said, have you ever really looked at like you said, looked at your practice through a patient's lens? And he said, I'm serious. Get in your car, pull up to your office. You usually come in the back door, doc. Do you see all the trash that's in your flower bed out front? Or that it hadn't been, shrubs hadn't been trimmed in 2 years? You know, go into your waiting room. Are there, magazines there from 1972? Maybe, you know, go literally. And I used to do this. Go lie down on your treatment tables and look through that hole and see how much dust and hair and crap is down there. And my team used to think I was nuts because that's something I said, that's within my control to fix. And so every day, those tables are wiped down, under them are wiped down, where people are looking, because they have a different perspective lying on that table than when you're sitting up. And I challenge docs. Go take a tour of your office as if you were a patient. Literally go through the steps of doing that, and I think you'll find that there are probably some things that could use a little bit of attention. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and we've lived in the same house for 28 years, 29 years, so I can't speak to this, but it's not unlike when you go to sell your house and then you look at all the things that you've ignored for so long that a realtor is going to say, well, should you fix the hole in the wall in your kitchen? Yeah, probably a good
I've
idea.
grown fond of it.
Yeah. And I think I read I don't remember what the book was, but it was, to your point, back to your employee, people that were operating in their areas of strength. And I call it there's a model called the COP model, which is competency, organizational need, and passion. And the goal is, how do you align those circles? And the more overlap and concentration, the better the fit. And they were interviewing housekeepers for hotels. And some of the best housekeepers, and they did exactly what you said. When they go into the room, they lay down on the bed and they look at the ceiling. They roll over to look at the nightstand. They open the drawer. And nobody does that, but those are the things that impact your experience as a traveler. So anyway, it's a fascinating thing.
Yep, no doubt. So everybody's talking about AI. As you may be aware, we started a Chiro AI a couple of years back, or a little over a year back, which is basically ChatGPT with a minor in chiropractic. All the data about chiropractic coding, billing, documentation doesn't take the replace of a consultant or a compliance specialist, but it's a great starting point for doing a lot of different things in your offices, doc. So take advantage of that. That's it. A Chiro AI. That's also on our website. With AI, I mean, it has literally changed the way our company operates in a relatively short period of time. Are you seeing AI as a threat to the human touch of leadership in healthcare, or look at it as the ultimate tool for efficiency?
That's a really good and deep question. Um,
And I'm expecting a really good and deep answer, Jay.
yeah, well, I'll do my best. Not sure.
No pressure.
Um, so I think it is the most transformative thing that uh, will be experienced by me in my lifetime. And I remember the first time I heard about the web. I remember where I was, the leader that was telling me about how big of a thing it was going to be. I was sitting in a boardroom. I was a young consultant, and he talked about this World Wide Web. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know why you'd use that, but whatever. Sounds cool. So I don't have a great track record of being this visionary, but I see this as being the web on steroids in terms of the impact it's going to have on the world, not just business, because I think it's going to impact everything. I'm of the philosophy that for many jobs, it will replace jobs. I don't think there's any question about that. But I think the mantra I use is, AI isn't going to replace you, but somebody who leverages AI better than you will replace you, because it makes you so much more efficient. And I don't know if I've talked to everybody about this book. If you've heard or read the book, The AI Driven Leader, it's by a gentleman named Jeff Woods, Jeoff. And it radically changed how I view AI, because my initial thought was AI is going to make us all dumber. We're going to be so dependent, and we're not going to have any good critical thinking skills. But what he talks about is using AI as your strategic thought partner, and you have access to the world's best compliance expert. You have access to the world's best executive coach. You have access to the world's best sales strategy person. Whoever you want, you have access to it. And his prompting structure is called CRIT, CRIT. It's context, role, interview, task. And so the first thing, which I don't think is new, but I've beefed up what I do in the C, is here's the context of the situation. Any large complex thing I'm trying to solve, I use AI as my thought partner. And so I would put in the context, and it may be 3 paragraphs of context about the current situation, who the players are, how we got to this point, what the challenges are. Then the role is I want you to serve as my organizational development expert with a uh, worldview of complex healthcare organizations. And I want you to interview me and ask 5 questions, 1 question at a time, to make sure you understand the context and the role I want you to play. And the questions it asks blow me away every single time I do it. So it may say, we're trying to win um, your business. And it may say, how will the decision be made? Is Dr. Foxworth the sole decision maker, or does he have a board of directors? And are there any other influencers inside the organization? How does Christy Hudson play into this? And so it walks you through and it makes you a better thinker. I consider myself a pretty good question asker and a strategic thinker, but invariably it asks me questions that maybe I would have considered, but oftentimes it's stuff that I don't. And then when it develops, then the task is, I want you to build this for me. I want to have a 3-phase implementation plan, with the first phase being 90 days, then the next 9 months, and then the last 3 months. And for each phase, I want you to tell me what the KPIs are. I want you to tell me what the key success metrics are. I want you to develop whatever. And man, it produces some incredible stuff.
It blows my mind.
So
You
the
know,
interview piece is what I really am fascinated by.
yeah, I hadn't thought of it from that perspective. What I have personally experienced is my thoughts and my ideas are just mine. And for those that feel like, well, AI is going to make you dumber, I would go in the opposite direction and say, well, actually, if you use it right, it makes you smarter because it pulls the information together. And then it's our job to read it, interpret it, and decide if we're going to do it. And we would never have that other information. And so it's kind of ironic that we say it's going to make you dumber when in fact it's actually teaching you other perspectives, other ideas, coming at it from a completely different way. And so to me,
And and
that's a
it, no,
that's a learning process. Now,
and
it's nice that it does some stuff for you, but you've got to think through the problem and present it properly, and let's face it, it does help us hone our skills in presenting what's the real issue.
which I don't think we have very good skills at. I think we're always jumping to solutions without fully defining what the problem is. And so that's what I love about the crit method, is it forces you to think about the context and what is the issue that you're trying to solve, and what are all the supporting pieces of data. And I use Copilot, and what I like about Copilot is it's pulling from, I use OneNote, I use, all of the different Microsoft tools. So it's immediately pulling in everything that I've ever done on that subject, and it knows me and it knows my blind spots. And so I can also say, well, pressure test this for me. Where are the most likely places that the execution is going to fall down? And what should I do to mitigate that risk? So uh, it's unbelievably powerful. Uh, Back to your question, I think it will, if you, I've sat in meetings with chiropractors who say, "Hey, I'm not learning that stuff."
Yep.
And I'm just like, "Well, good for you for being so defiant, but you're insane." And you don't have to be an expert, but I think you have to understand how it can benefit you, especially for the complexity of managing an office and offloading a lot of those things that take a lot of time, that aren't necessarily value add for you, and they're not generating revenue. Why would you not want to do that? Because you're essentially hiring another employee that can perform those duties, and there's no cost.
Seconds. Yep.
And I've heard it described as a barbell, that by 2030, you're going to have people that are fully digital, and all they operate in is a digital world with AI. And then you're gonna have people that go back to more black and white. Excuse me. So instead of color TV and 5K, it's gonna be black and white with rabbit ear antennas, which most young people don't even know what that is, and be fully, personal. So I still think there, even in the future, the human touch is really, really important in healthcare, in leadership. Uh, so I don't see that going away, but I definitely see it being, an evolving front.
Yeah, I can remember years ago when I was in practice and, as a solo practitioner, you're the chief cook, bottle washer, advertising guy, you did everything. And, when we were trying to communicate to patients with a patient newsletter or early on an email series, there's nothing more intimidating than a blank piece of paper. And what AI does for me is I have a lot of ideas, but it's still a blank piece of paper until I start getting it out. And by entering in the issue, the problem, yeah, when we first started our Cairo AI, we were playing with it. Um, and I said, I want a series of 10 emails that are directed at females about back pain during pregnancy. And, 30, 45 seconds later, it's got these 10 emails, wonderfully written. A lot of the stuff came off of my website because it went out and searched it, and it put them together in a matter of seconds. Now all I gotta do is hit the send button. And, when you have that the playful part was when I got it done, I said, "All right, rewrite the emails that speaks more directly to the husband whose wife is pregnant and experiencing back pain, because it's a different conversation." And trying to get that, "Well, honey, maybe your back wouldn't hurt as bad while you're pregnant if you went in to see the chiropractor without getting your face slapped," kinda thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But so I had it write it from the man's perspective, and then I got back, got crazy with it. I said, "Write this in the tone of Shakespeare," and holy cow. And then I got really crazy. I said, "Write this in the voice of Andrew Dice Clay," and oh my gosh. Same emails, different tweaks, different perspectives. And so docs, even if you don't use it for anything but patient communications, newsletters, postcard, whatever, start to understand that what you say to a male patient about his back pain and what you say to a female, while there's similarities, there's some different motivators and drivers. And so speaking their language, I think AI can really help us do that because, as a chiropractor, I think like a chiropractor, so everything ends up sounding the same. But when you start using AI to say, take my thoughts and rewrite them to where they directly appeal to women 40 to 50 years old. I mean, whatever segmentation you want to do, you can do. And the fact that it can go and realize that there are certain words that you use if you're talking to someone in their teens, middle age, older, and if we're not, missing an opportunity if we don't dig into that and utilize that in our communications, I think.
I agree. But it's still, to me, that still requires you as the human in the loop to what are those things that you want to leverage it. So everything I do, I now think about how could AI help me in this exercise. Uh, and I don't consider myself an expert. I'm fluent and I'm learning. I've created my own agent that I'm playing around with. Our team, our technology team, we've got some really talented people, and the things that they're doing to create tools uh, without coding anything is remarkable. Uh, our head of IT now that was just promoted and reports to me developed a tool that would have taken probably a month worth of coding and QAing and testing and debugging over a weekend. And visually, it's always hard to design that user experience. So back to that. And that would take a lot of time from our team. So you can get the base functionality, but then how do you make it interactive and feel nice and flow? It did all of that. I mean, it's just remarkable what it can do.
Yeah. You lost your lights again. I
I'm
see
gonna
you back there. Need to extend the timer on those lights.
I haven't been in this room for a while, so that'll be the first thing I correct after I'm done.
So you're from what I'm hearing, you're kind of an expert in helping entities or groups navigate change. What's the first thing a leader should do when their industry is disrupted by a major technological shift? Because that really is, especially for us chiropractors, I think it's impacting us more because, depending on who you read and listen to, we weren't really at the first in line in adopting technology. We're there are some that are, fast adopters, but
Mhm,
our profession historically has been about 5 to 10 years behind the leading edge, if you will. And that's not always a bad thing because sometimes you can see what other people did and screwed up and then not do it.
mhm.
So there's some minor pluses to that. But clearly, AI is something that can revolutionize our office. I mean, who would have ever thought a chiropractor would have an AI bot answering their phones and handling their scheduling? I mean, I would have never seen that coming. So whether it's AI or anything else where we're navigating a change, where do you start, Chick?
I think one is to put your ego aside and not assume that you have all the answers, and, that sounds really simple, but we all have an inner dictator that sits on our shoulder, and whenever something is challenged that is not very close to us or we don't have a lot vested in it, we're good with change. But when you start talking about something that you built, that you've run or managed or used for 20 years, and you start talking about changing that, we're not open to change. We become very defensive. So I think part of this is being curious and willing to put your ego aside to learn more. And I think some of this is just I I've seen different graphs, and I can't describe it in great detail, but it was a huge box, and it had circles, hundreds of circles, and each circle represented maybe 3,000,000 people, so it was the world population, and the circles were color coded based on adoption of AI, and it was basically one little circle in the far right bottom corner that had part of it filled in, and it was showing how early we are in this adoption, because there's still a lot of people that they certainly know it, in terms of hearing about it, but they really don't know what it is. And so get somebody to coach you through it, show you the capabilities of it, and be curious and put your ego aside to do that. So that to me is the foundation of any kind of change. And then, as a leader who's trying to drive change in an organization and then also helping other organizations do that, it is being very clear about what the vision is, where you're going, what the role is, because people are inherently, they're either, I think we focus on the wrong part of the change curve when we're taking people through change. So if you think of a normal distribution, a bell curve, oftentimes we kind of fight to bring people along that would be on the low end of adoption, and we beg and plead them to get on board. And I think that's the wrong way to do it. I think you go for the early adopters and find those that are excited about it and empower them and then make them change ambassadors and try and bring the middle part of the distribution over. And, um, there are going to be some people that aren't going to come along. And at some point, that has to be a decision for any organization on how they're going to manage that. And I'm not a Jack Welch cut people. That's not my personality. But I often say it's not a full democracy. We want to have a great culture. We want to have it be a great place. And I want that for every organization I work with. But at what cost do you let people hijack the
Man,
organization and be a bitcher, moaner, and whiner, a BMW, and drag everybody else down?
I,
And
I,
we
I like
tolerate that.
Yep. It's and again, our company's gone through so much change, in 18 years as most any business does, and that is an ongoing problem. Nobody likes change. I mean, I remember when we switched over our software programs in the clinic. You know how long I had 2 softwares running? A year before I completely flipped the switch. So, tre preaching to myself just as much here. But when you've got a team like that, and doctors, I hope you hear this, and I hope it's a good takeaway for you. Understand change is hard. I love the idea of getting your champions of whatever it is you're trying to implement, and then hopefully people see, oh, they really do like it. I didn't think I would, and some of them will eventually come along. But when you've got someone, and it may be a well tenured person, and they're just simply not going to use the new this, or they're not going to use the new that. At some point, they may be a rock star employee, but at some point they become a terrorist. And I've used that term loosely, obviously. Um, but if the company has a direction and a goal and you're trying to achieve it, and I mean, take this down to the level of your practice, if you're trying to build a more pediatric oriented practice, but one of your staff hates dealing with kids, you got to recognize that and deal with that and either get them to fall in love with the idea and understand the why behind it, or you got to understand that may not be the best person to answer your phone when moms are calling in, and said, hey, I need to bring my family of 4 kids all under the age of 10. It's just not gonna fit well. So, that's the old right person, right seat, doing the right thing is the right way for the right reasons. That's kind of a mantra that we have in our company. So, yeah, it's been interesting to see that occur a few times, and one of Aaron that works with us, when he first came in, he said, "I don't wanna change anybody here." But in time, if we're making changes, if you can't change the people, then it's time to change the people.
Yeah,
Sounds kinda silly,
and
but
I think that the mistake that people make in this area, and again, I wanna preface this, I'm a huge believer in coaching and developing people and giving people every opportunity. Um, this is more of the last resort, but what I see is people hang on way too long and avoid having a difficult conversation. And then resentment builds up, and it's just a toxic place that everybody else, and the way I think of it is, man, this does not reflect well on me as a leader because I'm tolerating this behavior and everybody sees that. And people are smart. And what message is that sending to my top performers that you can be a BMW and, be a terrorist and hold me hostage because of the skills that you bring? And I what you tolerate in your presence is what sets the culture bar, and you just can't tolerate that kind of behavior. And I always say, "Hey, Ray, I can tell that you're not on board. You've made that abundantly clear in our one-on-ones. You've made it clear in our staff meetings. I see you roll your eyes. I see you sitting back with your arms crossed. You're not hiding your feelings, and they're your feelings, and I respect that. But what's it going to take to get you on board?" "Well, I don't know, chick. The way we did it in 1850 was a whole lot better than this new EHR system. Uh, I just don't buy into it." "Okay, well, fair enough. I appreciate the candor. So what can I do to help you find a new opportunity?" "I don't want a new opportunity. I love working with you and the team, and I want to be here." "All right, well, let's go back to door number one. What's it going to take to get you on board? Because there aren't two options. You don't get to stay and bitch. That's just not going to be an option. And I want you to be happy. And if you're not going to be happy here, then I think it's time for you to find a new opportunity." And and those, to me, that is it a hard conversation? Yes, but it's just an honest conversation that needs to happen.
it is for the benefit of the entire team in the company. I agree wholeheartedly. I had a patient many, many years ago, um, and he was the kind of guy that always had a smile on his face, always telling a joke, just, I mean, full of life. And I asked him, I said, "Man, you're always so happy." I said, "What do you do for a living?" He said, "Well, I work at Packard Electric." And he said, "My job is to fire people." And I said, "I have never seen someone who is in that role be so happy." He said, "It's great, Ray." He said, "I I have to figure out how to tell them to go to hell and make them happy they're on their way." And that, that's a bit crass, but the reality is it's like, you're clearly not happy here. Where can we find a spot for you to be happy? Because you're spending 40 hours of your life here and it's miserable for you. And oh, by the way, you're making it miserable for the rest of the team. So
Yep.
let's brainstorm.
Yep. And I have you seen that movie Up in the Air with George Clooney?
I
That
have,
I hadn't, and I watched it. I've been traveling a bunch and watched it on a flight, but that was his job, was to go around and fire everybody around the country. I'm like, oh my goodness. But I think the other impact that we haven't talked about is I'm a big believer that if you're an unhappy employee, you're gonna be an unhappy person in front of a customer, and that's not acceptable either. And so the ripple effect on the business is real, and people can't turn that on and off. If they're unhappy, they're unhappy, and it seeps through to every conversation. And I'm with you. I that's not a very fulfilling life.
no, not at all. Well, hang tight, everyone, while we take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Welcome back to our podcast with my friend Chick Herbert. Man, we have gone so far off what we were going to talk about, but I absolutely love it. These are the best podcasts. So let's point our attention towards your book a little bit, and talk about the difference between coaching versus directing. And in your book, you talk about the question centric coaching. Why is asking a question more powerful than just giving somebody the answer or telling them what to do, Chick?
Uh, so the book is called "It Begs the Question." Thanks to my wife for helping come up with that title. But I've had the opportunity to work with thousands of leaders across North America, and I continuously see leaders that deleverage their position by simply telling everybody what to do. So they're not doing their job, they're really doing everybody else's job. And my mantra is the best job to do is your own. And the way to do that from our research and experience is by asking questions to develop the critical thinking skills of your team. So instead of telling them what to do when they come to you with questions, and a common problem people say to me is, Chick, I don't have enough time in my day because I spend all my time answering questions for my team. And my initial response is, well, whose fault is that? Who's created that habit? And it's them, because every time someone comes to them, they dispense answers. And I get that it's quicker to do that, and you can get them in and out of your office or your virtual office. But to me, my job is to build the capacity in people that work for me, uh, and tap into their talents and their natural strengths and put them in the right seat and give them the right tools to do the right job. And if I'm telling everybody what to do, a simple question of, let's say you and I are going to go on a business development call for your business. And I say, well, Ray, tell me about what you know about this prospect. And you say, I don't really know too much. Well, just by asking that simple question, I can ascertain a lot about how you think. I can tell how you've prepped. I can tell how you take advantage of these opportunities. Versus if I go in there and I say, all right, well, I'm just going to take this over because I'm really good at this. And that's why I got promoted. So why don't you just sit back and watch the king close this big deal? And that's not your job. Your job is to equip the other person to go in and be effective. And so I believe asking questions opens up for self-reflection. It allows me to understand how they're approaching opportunities, and questions invariably force people. It's kind of like AI. It forces you to think about things in a different light than if I'm just giving you all the answers. And so it's a simple concept, but what I find is everybody is operating in such a busy warp speed mode that it's a lot easier for leaders just to tell people what to do than it is to develop their skills.
Yeah, as you know, I'm a big fan of the book Traction and the
Mhm,
its model, entrepreneurial operating system. And, one of the key components of that is to delegate and
mhm,
elevate.
mhm.
And if you're always giving the answers versus teaching them how to go find the answers and make the right decisions, then your day is going to be completely filled up with not distractions, but interruptions, and you really can't focus on the bigger things as a leader. So I think it's a very very critical point.
Well, and if I could, I think that a lot of leaders do that because the bigger stuff is intimidating and harder and not something that can just be checked off the list as send an email to Dr. Foxworth. It requires thought. And again, I'll go back to AI. That's where I'm leveraging AI to help me on those big things because it's the old adage of how to eat an elephant and where do you start. I think those big nebulous, more strategic things can be very intimidating. And versus having someone come in my office and I solve their problem for them immediately and tell them how to call back this customer and what to say. Um, but that's where the best job to do is your own. And what I find is most people are doing the jobs of their team and they're not delegating and elevating. And part of that is because they don't trust them. Well, then that's where coaching comes in to develop them so that they are capable over time. It's not an instantaneous turn. Uh, so simple concept, but hard to execute for a lot of people.
So I know you're personally involved. You're actually 2024 board member of the year for the Boys and Girls Club, and I know your role at NCMIC keeps you extremely busy. What fuels your passion and energy to do that, and how does that interplay with the way you do things at work? Well, it's encouraging to see someone who has a life at work, but also has a life outside of it, and not many, and a lot of times we don't do both well. What is it that drives you to be involved in that, and does it have a positive impact on what you do at work?
Well, and the other thing that I
And
do
I'm
is
asking this with the intent to encourage doctors to not just be the chiropractor when their practice is open, but to literally get involved in the community because no doubt that's one of the best ways to ever build a practice. People do business with people they know. And if you're only inside your four walls, you're limiting who you know. So how can someone, how does that work for you? And do you find
Mhm.
it helpful?
Yeah, I think it limits who you know and it limits what you know. I'm always amazed. I led a really large project for NCMIC. It was a 2.5 year project. It was a technology overhaul of everything that we do in the insurance company. It involved a 40 million data element conversion. We rebuilt
I remember
everything.
that.
And And that's why I now look like I'm 90 and I have about 80 pounds of extra baggage that I'm carrying around because it was extremely stressful. I was way out of balance, but it's in the rearview mirror and we made it. Um, but what I missed most during that time was having the ability to be out in the community, whether it was volunteering, serving on the board, which I still did, but I'll be honest, I was fairly pseudo because I just didn't have the bandwidth, emotionally or physically. And then, being out with people like you that energize me in conversations, and how important that is. So I think only working has many downsides. But for me personally, I grew up, my parents were very involved in the community, and I saw that from a volunteerism perspective. And our mantra here is, you've got to have a healthy community to have a healthy business. And we are really prideful about all that we do in central Iowa, which is where we're based. All of our senior management team serves on boards. We've got a number of our leaders across the organization that serve on boards. And I was talking to David Siebert, our new CEO, about this yesterday. My first board appointment was for Special Olympics Iowa, and I was still pretty young in my career. And I hadn't written a check to a community organization outside of United Way through our normal company giving. And now that just seems so wrong to me that it took me that long to figure that out. And so, how do you give your time, your treasure, and your talent? And for me, every time I do that, I feel better about life because I see the impact it's having at Boys and Girls Club on the young Central Iowa kids that are in our clubs that, quite frankly, for some, it's the one positive thing they have going on in their life. And we just Nick Mick sponsors, it's called Youth of the Year. And Youth of the Year starts out for our clubs, then it goes statewide, then region, then national. And it is a timed presentation where they talk about the impact that the club has had on their life. And man, it's the coolest event ever because it's directly interacting with the youth that are in the clubs, and you're hearing about what a difference it makes, and having uh, the people that work that are on staff that are good listeners and support them, and so it's incredibly fulfilling, and it's just a huge part of who I am, and I think the culture that we have here, and I encourage any chiropractor to get out. Everybody, we all say we're so busy, but if a pipe bursts at your house today, I could be home, in 5 minutes and spend half a day waiting for a plumber. So life will go on, but you have to make it a priority. And I think it's a huge priority, especially for a small business owner, to get out in the community because so many of my relationships, my most valuable currency is my network of friends and people that I know.
Yeah.
And and much of my success is attributed to that, and I don't not because I was given a pass, but because I was in conversations that were impactful where I could make a difference. And you're missing all of that if you're not out in the community, whether it's serving on a board or going to read to kids at school or helping with financial literacy or whatever the cause. And there are so many, and all of the nonprofits are in desperate need of help right now. Not unlike everybody in the world, there's just a lot of need. There's a lot of food insecurity. There's a lot of challenges.
Yeah, it's easy to be in a practice, especially as a solo doc, and to get beat up just by the day to day, the process. And so, getting involved in other things outside of the world of chiropractic, um, yeah, it can have a direct impact on your practice, but it really can help you top off your tank. You know,
Yeah.
it, you know, like I said, being in practice all the time can be draining. It's also be invigorating, but after a period of time, sometimes it's good just to have a different perspective, to have a different conversation than you're having. I think they call that being a well-rounded person, maybe?
Yeah, and life is hard. I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs, and I think having gratitude for walking away for Youth of the Year, I can't help but feel gratitude for all the blessings that I've been given. Um, and I just feel like I have a responsibility to give back and help other people in whatever way I can.
Yep, you bet. So if you could leave our audience with one common sense tip for improving their personal performance this week, what would it be?
Don't fill your prime time when you're at your best with miscellaneous mundane activities.
Easy to do.
So if you're a morning person and from 7 to 9, that's your optimal time, don't fill it with stupid stuff. Um, Save that for later and use that for your heavy thinking or seeing patients or whatever it is that you need to do. But be mindful of what you're doing when.
And that makes a lot of sense because we do have that rhythm of there are certain times of the day that, I mean, people operate on a they're in the zone during
Mhm,
part of the day, and the other part, sometimes we're zoned out. So
mhm.
stay in
Yeah,
the zone.
yep,
Look,
stay in
I
the
got
zone.
got some, just for fun questions. Who's your hero and why?
Hmm. I've never been asked that question, and I love the 4 H's. I would say my parents, and I'll go with my mom. I lost my mom. I thought I was pretty old and mature. I was 31 at the time, so relatively young. I was youngest of 6 boys, and my mom had cancer for 7 years that metastasized all over, and I was the only one in town. My brothers live all over the country, and so helping her through the last year and a half was incredibly hard, but watching how she did it with grace, and everybody loved my mom. She's been gone since 1997, and I still have
That's strange
I
sometimes.
yeah, I had a woman just a month ago say, your mom shopped at this store, didn't she? And I'm like, "All the grocery store." And I said, "Yeah, all the time." She said, "She was my favorite customer." This is all those years later. So I think she's
That's
my
so
hero
awesome.
just because of how she lived her life.
That's awesome. What talent do you have that most people don't know about?
I don't think people know anything about any of my talents because I don't have many. What talent that people don't know about? Gosh, I don't know. I've never been asked that question. I would like to think that people know my talents because
You use
I'm
them.
using my talents the majority of the time, which is why I love my job and what I get to do. Um, to me, my talents are visible because they're leveraged every day.
Actually being
Um,
used. The
yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story about that question is, I've had employees that have been with me 15, 16 long-term employees, and while you think you know someone, you don't always know someone, and part of that traction process was, to have icebreaker questions.
Mhm.
And so during one of our meetings, we're going around the room, and I find out one of our employees is a freaking opera singer. I had absolutely no idea. She'd been singing with the Mississippi Choir for years and years, and it's like, holy cow, how did I miss that? So I love asking that question.
No, it's a great question and a pretty uninteresting answer,
Well,
but
that's
I
all right.
I wish I had those talents. I don't. I think my talents are used in the workplace,
That you do.
uh, that I do.
Yeah. So what's the worst job you ever had? Maybe
I'll
that
give
one's a little easier.
yeah, that's easy. Actually, I'll do the one that's more appropriate, and then I'll do the second one. But the worst job is I bagged oranges in a produce factory, uh, and I had to put the little mesh bag next to the machine. It would fill it up with oranges, and I had to spin it, tie it, and then put it in a box, and then load it on a pallet. And I remember
Really
it.
really using your skill set, right?
Yes, yeah, well, and
At the time.
Clearly not, because I remember the owner coming down and he took some and he put them on the scale and he's like, "You idiot. These are all underweight." So I had to undo them all, put like one more orange in every bag. So that wasn't a good job. I think the worst job might have been when I was helping a friend who farmed and they were castrating pigs. And my job was to get them into the pen, and the odor and the smell was horrific, and I actually had to just throw my clothes away, including my shoes, because it was so
My
bad.
gosh. Yeah, that I think you just got the award for the worst job
Yeah. Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
No doubt. Well, doctors, if you're offering discounts, make sure you're not violating state or federal rules on dual fee schedules, inducements, or anti-kickback laws. The fines are no joke. Our profitable discount strategy keeps your discounts fully compliant and profitable. It starts with a free, no obligation call to see if we can help you, just like we've helped thousands of doctors nationwide. Many of our docs have seen a 20% revenue boost and a 50% patient retention within our network. For over 18 years, over 7,000 chiropractors have helped 4.3 million patient family members get affordable care through ChiroHealth USA. If you want more revenue, better retention, and peace of mind, call 888-719-9990 or visit our website at chusa.com, that's CHUSA.com, to see why ChiroHealth USA is the network that works for chiropractic and you. Vic, thanks so much. I really enjoyed the time together.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right. Y'all make it a great day.